Hi, welcome to Doctors and Coaches podcast, pre-recorded podcast. Today's topic it's going to be encouraging reading and literacy, and Dr. Cindy Sandis.
You know, um, I just love the topic of reading and literacy. And I want to start with this story, and it's really the truth. It doesn't sound like it could possibly be the case, but it was. So when I was a principal at an elementary school, kindergarten through sixth grade. And a lot of times I would go out on recess to just talk with the kids and see what was going on, right? And it was very informal. And I thought that was always important to create that bond with them. Well, I go out for recess. It's the morning recess, and here we have big trees, and then we have benches under the trees so that kids could sit and rest after they'd played or whatever. And so I see this boy sitting on the bench underneath the tree, and he's reading a book. And I thought, oh, isn't that cool, right? So I went over to him and I said, oh, I see that you love reading. And he said, no, I hate reading. And I'm thinking,
Oh,
okay, it's your recess. You could be playing and you're reading, but you say you hate it. So I said, well, tell me about your book. And he said, oh, wow, it's the best book I've ever read. And he's just animated and all a buzz about reading. And I'm thinking, okay, one plus one does not equal two here. So I said to him, I'm confused. You are obviously enjoying this book. You're wanting to read it on your free time. Why is it that you say you hate reading? And he said, oh, this isn't reading. Reading is what you do at the table with the teacher, and I don't like it. And so a lot of times I think that kids think of reading as the instruction of reading rather than the joy of reading to go on a new adventure. So, like if you were to read Harry Potter, that's an adventure, right? If you
right.
read Where the Red Fern Grows, it's an adventure. It's not, it's not about all these skills that you need. Now, somebody needs to teach you those skills so that you can read to enjoy. But I think when I talk about reading, to me, reading is about that joy you get. Maybe you read the lyrics of a song, right? And you love the song. Maybe you read a book. Maybe you read an article. Maybe you read a recipe and it turns out good. But that's the joy. And that to me is reading. Literacy is learning all the skills you need so that you can do this thing that you enjoy. And so I'm not telling you that that's the right way to think about it, but that's how I like to distinguish when we talk about encouraging reading. So the love of reading, and then literacy to me is more the science of reading, right? How do you read? You need to be sure that you read informational text. You need to read it this way. You need to be able to read biographies, and this is how you read them, right? Because there are different kinds of literature that you can read, and you read them differently. But I think that one of the coolest parts about expanded learning is that we can do disguised learning. And so that kids think they're doing A, but they're really also getting B. So if you were to do readers theater with kids or a chorus where they had to learn the words, all of that, that's reading, right? It's promoting literacy, it's practice, but who they would tell you that they're singing. They would tell you that they're doing something else. The reading is incidental to it. It's not what they're doing. So I think that this is a great topic to talk about, especially, and I would love for that to be for every kid in every uh, morning or school day classroom. But for teachers, they have to be so focused that they get all the literacy skills, right? That they can demonstrate that they have these skill sets that you need. That I think that they don't as much as they used to get to promote the love of it. And so I think in expanded
Right.
learning, we're blessed that we don't have to have a test score. We can just help you love it, right? And really appreciate that. So I'm really glad to have this conversation with folks about
Nice.
the art of reading and just loving every minute of it, no matter what the content is. That it's something that you
Yeah.
care about and that you want to learn and it matters to you. And whether it's entertaining or it's thought provoking or whatever, you enjoy doing it. So I don't know if you want to add to that or not, but that's kind of how I see that between reading and literacy.
Yes, yeah. When I was small, I was a little kid. I would hate reading, but that's because that wasn't my English was my first language, so it definitely wasn't fun. But the
Yeah.
stories that I would read, like you mentioned, like Harry Potter, Charles Webb, like just like stories that you can get into, then I would enjoy them, but I would not consider them like reading. I was a little boy,
Right.
like reading to me was like sitting at that table.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for kids, that is the case, right? And so if this
Yeah.
is something I don't like, I'm not going to say that I like this other thing, right? And yet
Mm,
reading is the other thing. It's the enjoyment piece, I think. But
yeah,
anyway,
it's in
so yeah, I just think that's kid, and I don't blame them, right? As an adult, you read because you want to read it, whereas when you're a kid, you kind of have to. So it makes a difference. So do we have some questions that we'd like to talk through?
Yes, our first question is why is promoting reading and literacy critical for youth development?
So, reading and math are these basic skills that are life skills. So no matter where you are in your life, maybe you're never going to read a novel ever, but you're going to have to read something to put together the bookcase that you bought, right? Because of course it comes in pieces. And sometimes they will just draw pictures, and that's not usually enough. You need some pictures and some words, right? So that you can figure it out. Or maybe the only time you're going to need to read is when you vote. Maybe that's going to be the only time that you really need to read and consider and understand. Or maybe you're going to be the person who loves to read and you always have one or two books going. But no matter where that is, it's an essential skill. Now, we are fortunate. There are reasons that people have challenges with reading. And one of them could be that English is your second language. And so you're trying to learn a whole bunch of new stuff. But you could also be dyslexic, where the words kind of scramble on the page for you, right? Or it's just challenging for you to make sense of those black marks on those pages, right? So reading can be a challenge for you in lots of ways. And one of the things that's really cool that mitigates that is all of the opportunities that kids have to listen to a book being read to them. So they can follow along, but they can also listen. And so you can get information. Or with newscasts, you could tune in to find out about certain initiatives on your ballot if reading was a struggle for you. So there are a lot of hugely successful people, or maybe I shouldn't say a lot, but there are successful people who have never truly been able to read and read well. However, for most people, it's kind of the first part of developing your own agency. And I think that that's also true with math skills. If you don't understand how money works, right, and you just think that that ATM card you have always backs you up, that's problematic, right? For you. And so I think that it's those are skills, but reading is a fundamental skill that I think people need to have. And then that allows you to think more critically. It allows you to ask questions. It allows you to make inferences, right? It does all that. But it's a foundational piece. I think that we have to
Yeah.
to give and help kids with to promote agency so that they feel, I can do this. I can read my driver's manual so that I can get my driver's license. Right? I mean, it's basic even in that, right? Because they're not going to give you a driver's license if you can't read the questions and you can't, right? They're just not. So I just think it's foundational. You have any thoughts about
I
that?
agree.
Yeah.
Oh no, not for this one.
Okay.
So the second question is how can I create a culture of reading in youth programs? A culture.
So I don't know if you've seen these recent commercials about kids with books and how many books that, people have that are in more affluent neighborhoods. Kids have lots and lots of books, and kids in less affluent neighborhoods have very few. And they've done lots of research about having access to books. And if you can't afford them yourself, take your kid to the library so that your kids can have access. And if you're working at a school, in the expanded learning program, see if you can't get access to the library so that kids can have access to books. And they need to have access to all kinds of books. While you and I may love Harry Potter, which I did, I'd like that a lot more than reading articles that are about data research. But I read data research articles as well, right? So it's not that you get to never read the kind you don't like, but I think you have to expose kids to lots of opportunities. And maybe you're the kid who's not going to like the books about Harry Potter, but you're going to love the books about dogs and how to take care of them and how to train them, how to teach them, because that's something you're interested in. So I think that we can create a culture of reading by actually giving kids a chance to read, but not reading so that you can grill them with comprehension or vocabulary development. But how does the book make you feel? What does it inspire you to think about doing, right? That kind of thing. And then have them be able to do something with it. So what, you read it. Okay, maybe you're going to do something as benign as making a poster. Great. But maybe you're going to do something as active as a reader's theater, where the kids join in and actually read the book aloud. Maybe you're going to have the kids make a podcast reading the book aloud, because you can get all kinds of read aloud books through YouTube. So maybe they're going to do that. Maybe they're going to take on a project where they're going to go and be a reading buddy to a kid that's younger, right? There are all kinds of things that you can do to create a culture that says reading's important. And if you struggle, it's okay. We can help you through this. Here are some strategies that you can use when reading's more challenging for you. But I think that we have to do that. And I don't know about you, but I have probably listened to well over 500 books on tape. And I get the unabridged versions. And when I drive in my car, I listen, right? And I've consumed many a book by just listening. And so that broadens your horizons. And it doesn't mean that I can't read it, but I don't have time a lot of times. And so if I were struggling to read, I could access books on tape through audiobooks and be able to have that. The library has them for free sometimes. So there's lots of things you can do to give kids the opportunity to read and read what they want to read, not what you've predetermined they want to read, not the textbook that they have to read, but what do you want to know more about? What are you curious about? So I think that you build that culture by bringing that opportunity to them often, right? And I think as an adult, you need to let them see you reading, even if you're kind
Yeah.
of pretend reading, right? Because they're going to look to you as a role model. And if they see you reading, even though you may also be focused on the rest of the class, right? But if they see you reading, it somehow that gives it a blessing, right? And approval. So I think that's how you do that
That's
with
right.
culture. When you were in school, when you think back on your teachers, did some of them create an environment that was more focused or easier for you to grapple with reading than in others? Or were they about the same, or how did they do that?
Yes, I would have some teachers that would make reading more fun for us. Like they will have like small sections where they have like they create like their own little library, and
Hmm.
they'll make it cozy. So,
Yeah.
and they will give us time to like sit there and like have a reading some reading time. If we're done with their work, then they would just like be like, okay, you can go to the library, and like you would just write their little section, and we could just sit there, pick a
Hmm.
book, and it'll make it more fun for us and more encouraging for us to
Yeah.
read.
And I loved your
And then I
word
was also
comfy and cozy, right?
yes, yeah, that's what they yeah, that was it was nice. And I also was thinking like we used to have a like reading clubs back then. I don't know if
Hmm.
that's a thing now, but that was a big deal back then too. Like we used to join like reading clubs, and we used to pick a book that we all liked, and we read it as a group, or and then do activities around that book. So it
Hmm.
was just I think that's the way they will encourage the culture of reading in there.
Absolutely. And if you're in expanded learning, a reading club is a great enrichment opportunity, right? A great opportunity. And if you're coming from the school day, it's also a great opportunity. It's a
Oh yeah.
win-win all the way around for kids, I think. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, what else do we have?
All right, next question is, what strategies encourage reluctant readers to engage with books?
So I think that you are reluctant to read for there can be more than one reason. Maybe you have trouble reading, right? Maybe it's not your strong suit. Maybe you're not an informational text reader and that's what you're focused on. Or maybe you're not a novel reader. You don't like novels. You'd rather have right. So that's reluctance comes from lots of reasons. It can come from I'm not able to do it very well and I don't want to be ridiculed to I can read just fine, but I don't want to read what you want me to read. Right? I'll read it, but I'm not happy about it. So one of the things that I think is really important to do with kids is to give them choices. So if you have a library where you can choose the book or books that matter to you, I think that makes a difference. And I think that you can provide them with a skill set of a couple things to do to be sure that they're going to like the book they pick. Because sometimes I think kids just pick a book, right? Right, yeah, and I'm not right. So let's pick one you like. And so you could tell them a lot of times books on the back cover have a summary of what's going to be in the book. So you could teach them to at least go and check to see if there's a summary of the story. You can teach them to open randomly to a page, read the page and see how they like that, and then do it one more time so that they can see what's in the book a little bit, so that they're making a choice not out of necessity for getting it done within 20 minutes, but a choice based on what they like to read. And I think that's important. Um, I think it's also important to teach kids how to identify a book on a topic. So libraries, I'm pretty sure still use Dewey Decimal, which isn't very helpful for us. But they also have online structures, right? That you can go on. So you could go online and say, I'm interested in stories about famous artists because that's your thing. And then you could see the books that would come up to help you decide what you want, what you're interested in. So I think that that's possible as well to promote it. But I think choice matters. I'm far more likely to read what I want to read than what you think I should want to read, right? Because I know what I'm interested in. And then I think it's also okay to a point. I think there's advantage to having kids read through a whole book or a whole article, but if they get into it and they really don't like it, then maybe it's time to have an option to they can either choose to complete it or they could make another choice. So my number one thing to help build that is choice. Choice in what you read and where you read, right? Are you going to read laying down? Are you going to read in the beanbag chair? Are you going to read in the library? Are you going to read at a table? So not only what you'll read, but where you'll read. And I think that's important. And then how will you read? Will you read with a team of people? Will five of you read the same book? Or no, it's just you. So I think that those are ways that you encourage kids to read when they're reluctant.
I
So were you
agree.
ever a reluctant reader?
Um, I I think maybe when there was books I didn't like that I think I don't like, yeah, I was. But those
You
were
went,
like, yeah,
yeah,
I would
not
never read them.
interested, not interested, right?
Yeah,
For sure, totally
definitely.
get that. And I think that there's also reading a book and then there's engaging with that book. So when you engage, you do something else. You take it beyond. Maybe you do a character study of the character you liked best. Maybe you do a character study of the one you liked least, and then you can take quotes from the book about that they said or they did that made you like them least. Okay. That engages you with the context. I love it when we also do things like, okay, now that you've read the story, what's an alternate ending? How else could this story end? Because had they made different choices along the way, it would have ended differently, right? So had Cinderella not gone to the ball, she wouldn't have had to worry about getting her slipper. But how could you have still gotten the outcome that she became the princess, right? How else could you have done that? right? So you could come up with alternative endings, which I think happen in novels. And I think that can be fun for kids because it makes you think, okay, how do I make this happen? Because she's not going to be at the ball. She's not going to be dancing with the prince. She's not going to lose her glass slipper. So how do we make this happen? Right? So that could be fun as well. So all of
Definitely
that
agree with that.
encourages kids to read, I think, even when you're
Yes.
reluctant.
So the next question is, how can I connect reading to youth interest?
So, first of all, you have to know what they're interested in. And not every kid is interested in the same thing. Some kids are interested in sports. Then you want to find maybe biographies of famous Olympians, famous baseball players, famous football players, right? And there are plenty of those out there. If they're interested in volleyball, find that, right? If they're interested in ice skating, if they're right in gymnastics, find out what they're interested in, so it's not enough to know they're interested in sports. It's what sport are you interested in, and what do you know, and is there a hero that you have in that sport that you would like to look at? I think too that you can ask things about other interests. So sports is always an easy one, but sometimes they're interested in music. Well, what can we find and we can read about music, right? I think that that's important. So I think you have to help the kids identify what they're interested in and then help them figure out, okay, is it this part of it you're interested in or this part or something different? And how can we set you up so that you can find access to those materials? Because once they have that, I think that it's easier, right? And you can also not everything's a novel. I don't know if you've ever read Gone with the Wind, but probably not. But it's hundreds and hundreds of pages. You'll be reading for forever. They made a movie out of it and they had to give you an intermission in the middle because it's so long, right? So for some people, they
Sometimes,
look
yeah,
at this
I,
book that's this thick and you think, no, I'm not doing that. So you can always provide shorter text, right? Summaries, things like that, so that they can take a look at it and then make a decision. So if I had read something in a summary about war and peace, for example, and I said to myself, wow, my ancestors came from Russia, and I'd really like to know more about that period of time, then I'm going to be willing to read a pretty complex book. But if I read the summary and I think, yeah, no, whatever, I don't care, then having me forced to read that book's not going to be helpful. So we need to know that we can help them by actually giving them opportunities to do many pieces from it, right? MINI, so that they can decide if it's really the book that they're interested in. And certainly give them books about being a chef or drawing a picture or writing a book or riding a horse or training a dog or, as long as it's fitting what they're interested in doing. Because I think half the battle is finding you a book that would be of interest to you rather than having someone assign to you a book that you're going, can't stand it, right? Because I think that
yes,
happens.
that's right.
So if you have thoughts, by all means. If not, what's another question?
All right. Next question is, how can I teach youth to analyze and interpret text?
Uh, you know, that's a $50 million question for sure, because it's not easy. If it were easy, every school day classroom would be full of kids who could do that. And it's not. But one of the things that I think is important to do is it with inquiry. It's with posing questions rather than saying to a child, the purpose of this book, the purpose of the story of the three bears was to teach you to not go where you don't belong and to not be selfish and use up other people's resources for yourself. Let's say that that's what you said. So I can tell you that, but that's not really going to help you in the long run. So I could ask you, So if you were thinking about Goldilocks, is Goldilocks somebody you'd want to be your friend? Why or why not? Right. Well, I wouldn't want her because she'd break into my house and destroy my stuff. Or, yeah, no, I'd like for her to come and be in my house and I would want her to right. It's there's no right or wrong answer there, but it is engaging the kids in that opportunity to analyze what went on. What would have happened if the wolf would have gone to the third pig's house first? Story would have been completely different, right? And I don't know if you know this, but they have a great it's a cute story. So you have the Three Little Pigs story, the classic one, and it's written from the viewpoint of the pigs, right? Here are these poor pigs. They try and leave home so that they can find their place in the world. And this big bad wolf comes along and tries to eat them one at a time. And finally, they're able to, get rid of the wolf. Okay, that's the story. But there's another version that's really cute that's from the wolf's point of view. And of course, the wolf says, I wasn't trying to eat them. I was just trying, right? Blah, blah, blah. And it's just fun to read. So you could take another book, right? That has the same kind of interaction and say, okay, so this is the bad person or the bad guy of the book. How do they see this book? How do they see this story playing out? And that would give kids an opportunity to really analyze what's going on, right? Because it's not going to just be simple. It's like, whoa, okay, told from another lens, what does this story look like? If you were telling the story of Harry Potter from a Voldemort lens, the story would be completely different, right? Because Voldemort is saying, I'm perfect. I want, right? That's his point. Everybody should acquiesce to him. So I think that that's one of the ways to help them analyze it and kind of interpret it by giving them activities and prompts and questions to make them consider. And you can also pull out a single event. Well, had this one event changed, would it have changed anything else? What if he was the big bad wolf wasn't able to destroy the first little pig's house? What if that didn't happen? How would the story have changed? So I think that that's the way you help them analyze and interpret by truly asking questions beyond how many pigs were there in the story, right? What activities did the pigs do? Which keeps you at a very basic level, which I'm not saying is not important, it is, but to ramp it up to higher levels of thinking and engaging them that way, I think is most appropriate. And I think kids will want to do that because it's fun, it's different, it's making them think and make that story their own.
I
So,
agree with that. That's
yeah, your
definitely.
thoughts. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So, another question.
So yes, our next question is, what role does storytelling play in promoting literacy?
So, literacy and reading are about the stories, right? If they are not if they are fictional, it's about the story. If it's informational, it's about the information that was gained, maybe an experience they had, but it's very factual, right? So, I think that storytelling is like a touch point, right? It's something that you will remember. I was working with a gentleman who was a very active member of a nonprofit board in Orange County. And he made a comment one time and he said, while we all like to see the numbers, 5 people were here and now 10 people are here, right? I mean, they like the numbers. He said, what I love most is the stories because the stories make it real. And I think that's what stories do. So when we have a story, whether it's our own story or the story that we've made up in our mind or a story of somebody else, I think that's really, really important in promoting literacy and reading because I'm finding out, I'm gaining insight into another human, be that a real human or a not real human, doesn't matter. but I'm gaining that insight into them. And I think that the storytelling is what you'll remember. You may not remember uh, oh, I can't think of the author's name, but I read one of his books and it was about 400 pages long. And the first 150 pages were about the flora and the fauna of the land, right? And it's like, could we ever get to the story? And then when we finally got, I think it was James Michener, and I think that the book was Hawaii. And they spend all this time setting you up for the story that I thought, you know what, we need to get to the story or I'm going to be done. Well, then when you get to the story, it's great because it's truly a story. And so I think we all like stories, even when they're factual. They don't have to all be made make believe stories. But factual stories are telling of events, of things that either did or could have occurred. And I think that makes it far more interesting uh, for me, anyway. So if I wanted to do a factual, for instance, with Abraham Lincoln, fact, born on April 12th, whatever year that was, fact, lived in Kentucky, fact, right? I could give you all those facts. I could give you the facts of his death, right? Or I can tell you a story about him, how he walked 5 miles to return 2 pennies to the person because he'd given them the wrong change. Now, I can tell you that story, and your conclusions about Abraham Lincoln are much different than me giving you a factual book about him. And those are the stories that make the characters real, I think. So that was a long answer to a
Yes.
pretty short question, but I think it's important.
Yes. That was good. Moving forward, the next question is, how can I use technology to support literacy development?
So when you're trying to teach reading skills, literacy development, uh, I don't think there's anything that takes the place of an interaction with an adult. So I want to say that first. But I do think that technology is a consistent teacher. I don't know, every school uses something and it's usually different. But my grandkids use Lexia, and Lexia will teach them skills and it will teach them over and over and over again until they're sure that they've mastered them. They will take the skill and adjust it into different ways to learn about it. So it's not like learning the same thing over and over again. It's learning the skill over and over again, but in a variety of ways. iReady is another program that you can get that's got technology. So I think that that's important. I think that technology certainly allows kids practice time. I don't think it takes the place of an interaction with another human, but I think it can support the interaction with a human. And so I think that technology is very helpful. You could also hook them up with pen pals. And if you did that, I now have a reason to write. Whereas if I never, why am I writing this? It makes no sense. But if I'm writing to a pen pal, right, that could promote my reading and also my literacy because reading or writing is certainly a literacy skill. So I think that's important. And I think that anytime you can get an interactive reading app where they do this and they get feedback, whether that's balloons or let's try again or whatever that is. I think that technology is a tool. It's not the teacher, but it's a tool.
Yeah.
And how you use that tool will either promote your learning or it won't, but it is a tool. And I think too often we think of it as the teacher. Oh, yay, I don't have to worry about that anymore. Lexia will take care of being the teacher for me. No, that's not the truth. Lexia is going to give the kids practice on what you'd like for them to learn. And so I think that technology, using it correctly as a resource rather than the program, right? This is how you're going to do it, is can be very, very beneficial because they learn a lot and they can learn about speaking in third voice, first voice, right? There's just lots they can learn. And then you can give them that in theory. And then when you bring them to the table for reading group, then you can ask, okay, so you watch this. Do you have questions about that? Were there things that you weren't clear about? Were there things that captured your interest that you'd like to learn more about, right? You can have those discussions with them as well if they've gone through and read this interactive stuff that they can give back to you. So that's how I'd use
Definitely.
technology.
I was, yeah, so I was thinking about because you mentioned earlier, you listening to like the audiobooks. I feel like that's another way, like, to promote, to support technology to support literacy. Have the kids sometimes just listen to the audiobook instead of reading it, and that'll help a lot too.
Does. And and all the audiobooks I've listened to, and sometimes the author reads their own work, sometimes they have actors read them, right? So I've listened to all kinds of people read. I can honestly tell you, I've only had one bad reader. And it was an author who wanted to read their own stuff. And they read it like this, and they went on and on and on and on. And I'm thinking, you should have paid somebody to do this for you. This was not your forte. Uh, but most of the readers are absolutely amazing. In Harry Potter, the guy who did the reading created over 120 voices
Wow.
to read those books. And when you listen to them as he reads them, you know exactly which character he is because he has perfected the voice for that person. And it resonates with you. And so I think that using technology that way as an audiobook would certainly be awesome, especially, well, no, I'm going to say that. I don't care if you're a great reader or not a great reader, the value you get out of it would be different. But as a great reader, you're going to hear things in it that you could not have heard, even in your own mind, which I think is pretty nifty, right, to do. So that'd be my answer to that.
Nice. Next question is, how can I involve families in literacy programs?
You know, I don't know where your families are. Some families have had really bad experiences in school.
Mhm.
And why are they going to sign up to do more, right? I mean, they're just grateful they got out with their life. That's how they feel. And so I think that it's cool to bring kids together with families. So maybe one night a quarter. So there's 4 quarters in the year, but we're online 3 quarters of the year. So maybe what you want to do is to bring parents in once a quarter for a literacy night and have the kids do a reader's theater, show their posters, read passages, ask to sit and read a small book with their family members so that they're sharing literacy together. I think that that's how you get families engaged. I don't think you get families engaged just by telling them this is what you ought to do. I think you do that by modeling, by showing, by demonstrating, and certainly by having youth inspire their parents to join with them, I think is way cool. And I think that it's hard for a parent to say no to a kid, right? To say, no, we're not doing it that way. So if kids are asking you, you're far more likely to want to be able to participate. And I think that families need to know what kids are reading, strategies they're using. So you could have the kids make a little presentation, and when mom or dad gets there to pick them up, they could spend 15 minutes and the child could show them that. So it wouldn't be like everybody sitting down getting a presentation. It would be the kids presenting for themselves to their family member to engage them. So that's one of the strategies I would try for sure.
Definitely. See, I would think like have like a reading night, invite the parents over, have somebody read like small book and then create activities around it. And
Absolutely.
I know elementary school like that goes pretty good.
Yeah,
Because
no,
the
it
kids are
does.
always like,
And it's a shame that by the time the kids get in junior high, we've given up on it because the kids
yeah,
will go, "Oh, I can't believe I'm doing this." And you don't know that that's really what they think or that's what they're doing for effect, right? I mean, if they've got an audience, it's going to be, "Oh, this is horrible." If they don't have an audience, maybe it's not so horrible. So giving them
Yeah,
those choices and opportunities, I think makes a huge difference.
it does. It
Yeah.
does. So next
Okay.
question is, how can I encourage youth to set reading goals?
Well, first of all, I think they have to know what a goal is. A goal is where you want to be at a given time. So, for instance, I could have what I think of as a long-term goal, and I would say by the end of 2025. Another goal could be at the end of 2026, right? So goals have lengths, duration, and I think that that's important to teach them. So where do you want to be by this time? Right? And I think that that's important. I want to memorize all my math facts by uh, Thanksgiving. Okay, that's a goal that they're having. Now, to change that goal from an espousal, which means, oh, this is what I want, but I'm not going to do anything about it, to so that you take it from this espousal and you make it be an aspiration, then the question becomes, how are you going to get there? What are you going to do? So if I want something by such and such a date, I need to backward plan. I need to say, okay, this is where I want to stand. This is where I want to end up. What were all the things I had to do to get here? And you go through and then you ask yourself, are these in any sort of logical order? And then you can put them in a lot. This is what I do first. This is what I do second. But I think that that when you do that, it helps them determine how to set a goal. Okay. Then I think that they have to identify criteria for success. If what you want to read by June 30th is 20 books, and we're starting right now in September, and your goal is to read 20 books by the end of December, you need to collect some data. How many days are there? How can you access these books? How long will it take you to read a page? Right? All of those questions that you ask, and then they have to go in and set those goals realistically. So if what I know is that I'm going to have 30 minutes a day to work on my reading goal, and that's 4 days a week because on Friday we're going to do Fun Friday. That means I have 2 hours a week to work on my goal, and I'm going to work on it for 8 weeks. That means I've got 16 hours. And I think a lot of times people think, no, they have all these hours to work on. No, they're going to focus, right? And so what do I need? What do I need to be able, right, at this time to be able to produce what I want to produce? Maybe I'm going to have to ask the site coordinator. Maybe I'm going to have access to a a computer. Maybe, right? But you're backward planning so that every step you take from this moment forward is going to get you closer to the thing you want, which in this case, we said was being able to access something on the computer, right? But you've got to back up. So, what is it you want at the end of the day? And I think the end of the day should be at least 3 to 6 months out, right? When we set a goal, it's not like my goal is to not eat peanut M&Ms today. That's way too cinchy. A goal has to be more than that. And so I think to help them learn how to do that I think that matters. But this is what a goal looks like. These are different ways you can craft it. If you craft it outside of being with us, you need to send us a copy so that we understand what your goals are. And I think the first time you do this with kids, you'll not have all that many goals because we don't encourage kids to set goals. We encourage them to do work, be productive, but I don't think we really teach them to be creative and empowered and have the ability to figure those things out. So that's what I think. I think that it's encouraging them. it's being there for them, and it's also modeling it. All of those things matter. So that would be my response to that.
That's good. That was a good one. Um, I just remembered that we used to have like a reading chart and they would put stars.
Mhm,
And I know the library we used to be involved a lot in how many books we would read.
mhm.
We had like a reading marathon. So I was
Oh,
excited
fun.
to, yeah. So that was fun.
Yeah,
That's what some ways that they would encourage us.
absolutely. Have you ever heard of Battle of the Books?
Yes, that Battle of the Books. Yes, I
Yeah.
was involved
And
in
I
that.
think kids like that. You pick like 10 or 12 books and they all need to read them all. And then it's like Jeopardy, right? You have they have to answer questions. And so, and if you did it like Jeopardy, where let's say you had 5 books and column one was book number whatever it was, The Sorcerer's Stone. Book number two, Red Where the Red Fern Grows. Book number three, um, Alex the cat, number, whatever that is. And then they would be able to ask for 100, 200, 300, 400, $500 questions, knowing full well that
Mhm.
500 questions, those down at the bottom are going to be more complex questions. But then you could do that with kids and they could, battle of the books could be fun and they would be, three of them competing at a time with this Jeopardy board, which could be a lot of fun for kids and
Oh yeah,
where
yeah,
they get the answer and they have to come up with the question. So
yes.
that could be fun and uh, and engaging, right?
Yes.
Everybody wants to do that, and I think we need to avoid what I call PhD. Uh, PhD is when you pile it higher and deeper, and you're not going to do anything with it. You're just going to keep piling it up for the kid. So if we're going to do something to really promote literacy, to promote them wanting to read, we need to do several things, but we need to do them really well. So if you're going to have them like a Jeopardy style thing, you need to really do that well so that they can actually, have fun with the game and everybody cheering everybody on and that kind of thing. So I would just encourage lots of thinking outside the box to make
Oh
reading
yes.
not the factual part, but the fun part of it fun. And then we'll drop in an informational article once in a while for you. Although we do need to teach that as well. So I think that those are things that we do to help
Yes.
support literacy
Definitely.
and the ability to read, the competency of reading.
Right, definitely. So next question is, how can I use book clubs to promote literacy?
I think you should answer that because you talked about being in a book club. So how did that promote your literacy? How did that help you
Well,
be
being in a
better?
book club, yeah, so it did encourage me to read more just because I was around other students that I wanted to read. So I wasn't just like it was just more fun knowing that there was more people around me that were doing the same thing as me. It made me be more open about reading certain genres that I wasn't really good at. Well, what I didn't think I really liked, I meant. Um, and it felt more like an inclusive club. Like, you're around people that you're more around people that are interested on this. So
Yeah.
that kind of promoted literacy for me.
Absolutely. And that's what I would encourage people to do. Right? Bring kids together and so that there's the camaraderie. I think that it matters for kids to be part of something. And
Yes.
and you can be part of a classroom, but you can be part of a subset of a classroom as well. And that could be around, what you're interested in. So yeah, I would say that a reading club. Absolutely. And it's, I think, reasonably easy to implement, right? Especially if you have access to the library. And maybe you want to have 3 or 4 different novels going, or maybe you want them to all read the same thing. And that could be tricky, right? Getting 20 of the same copy of books might be trickier than,
Yeah.
but it's possible. It's not impossible. You could get some real bang for
Definitely.
your buck out of that. I
All right.
think that's great. So do we have time for what, one or two more questions tonight?
Yes, we do. Next
Okay.
question is what strategies help youth improve their reading and comprehension?
You know, they have to be asked questions. They need to retell. So I would say that there's retell, summarize, ask questions. So in retelling a story, what a kid would do is in summary form go through and give you the highlights of the story. So there were these three bears, and the porridge was too hot, so they went for a walk. And a little girl named Goldilocks came along. She sat in the baby bear's chair and broke it. She ate from the baby bear's porridge, and so he didn't leave any for the bear, and then went to sleep in the baby bear's bed. And ultimately, the bears come home. They find Goldilocks, and she runs home. Right? I mean, that's a simple summary that you can tell. And so I think that that would tell you whether they got the flow of the story. Okay. So I think there's that question. Can you retell the story? A summary of the story would be not going through those events one by one, but saying something like, in summary, Goldilocks broke into the three bears' house and they found her there after, while she was asleep, after she had broken a chair, right? Eaten the porridge, and then they found her in the bed. That would be a summary so that you could teach them about summarizing. Then, so there's retelling it, there's summarizing it, and then there's asking questions. So, what do you think Goldilocks was thinking when she opened the door to a house that was not her own and went in? What do you think she was thinking? Well, I think she just wanted to know what was inside, blah, 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 whatever they come up with, right? But then you can have a conversation of deeper meaning about the story. And so I think that questions are always important, but I do think that kids need to retell. I do think that kids need to summarize. And then I think you need to ask questions on different levels. If you were analyzing the story of the three bears, why do you think the baby bear is the one she picked on, right? Why didn't she eat Papa Bear's food? Why didn't that happen, right? So they can be thinking about that. So you can ask questions at different levels for them, and that's going to promote that as well. So I think that we just need to realize that comprehension is, what are you taking away from this? You can ask them questions like, what are three things you learned from this story? Two ways that you might apply them to your real life, and one thing you're going to do tomorrow, right? Well, which will get them to the point and the comprehension of the story. So that's what I would say. I don't know what you'd like to add.
Uh, I think that was a good answer.
Okay, that's fine. I think we ask a lot of dumb questions, right? Or we just have them retell and we don't do anything else. Or we just have them summarize and we don't do the other two. Or we just, right? And it needs to be all three of those, I think, to make a real impact on the kids. All
I
right. I
agree.
think this will be our last one.
All right. The last question is, how can I integrate literacy activities into other subjects?
Well, certainly, if you're having kids read about science or social studies, that's a pretty easy thing because they're reading, right, already, and they're using those literacy skills. But let's say that you're going to go out and play the game uh, triangle tag, and you teach the kids how to play triangle tag, and you show them this, and they play it, and they do that. Then you could have them also promote literacy by going back and number one, retelling how the activity went, writing a summary of it, and then writing down the directions for the next person to come, right? So that they would have been playing a game that's incredibly fun, but they would then be taking that and moving it into a literacy environment. I think sometimes when we focus on, oh, we have to teach this skill, we have to work on this academic piece, or we have to do this, we miss the opportunity that's there if we will just go with it. What difference does it make if I learn how to be reflective by reading The Three Bears or War and Peace? It doesn't matter as long as I learn to be reflective after I've read. And I think that's what we need to focus on is the big picture, and then help kids by using individual books to understand their place in the space, right? And the big picture. So I think that we're finished. As for me, I'll just say thank you so much for showing up. Appreciate it. And Robert, I'm going to let you sign off. But anyway, glad you were here.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All
Thank you.
right. Bye, everybody.